Hello, friends. I'm Misty. How are you all? Take a moment to imagine a world where time does not exist, a place where you can spend as much time as you want, do whatever your heart desires, but your age will never increase. Intriguing, right? Let's dive into this unique story. The movie begins during the Second World War. We see a family frantically urging their children to leave the house as bombs rain down outside. They all rush to the basement for safety. During the war, it was common for families to send their children to secure places. The next scene shows people in London gathering to send their children to safe locations. Some were sent to relatives, while others went to hostels. The family from the opening scene also comes to bid farewell to their children. Though reluctant, the mother eventually lets them go. Each child carried a small note with Professor Diggory's address. As everyone dispersed to their destinations, the siblings waited, hoping someone would come for them. Soon, Professor Diggory's housekeeper arrived and took the four siblings to a grand, beautiful house. Upon entering, the housekeeper sternly instructed them not to run, touch anything, or make noise. Most importantly, they were to stay away from Professor Diggory. The siblings were Lucy, the youngest, Susan, the eldest sister, and their two brothers, Peter and Edmund. Lucy, being the youngest, missed her home terribly. The others comforted her, promising they'd return home as soon as things got better. In this enormous house, there wasn't much to do besides eat and play. Lucy often begged everyone to play with her. The house had many rooms, and the siblings played hide and seek, scattering to different spots. Lucy stumbled upon a peculiar room where the story's most significant object was kept, a wardrobe. She hid inside the wardrobe, but as she moved further in, it seemed never-ending. Past the coats, she discovered a snow-covered forest. Driven by curiosity, Lucy ventured into the forest. Bewildered, she wondered where she was. Suddenly, she heard a noise and saw a strange creature, a being half human, half goat. Though initially scared, Lucy gathered courage and approached it. The creature introduced itself as Tumnus and explained that the place was called Narnia. Tumnus invited Lucy to his cave-like home, offering her tea and playing soothing music. Lucy felt so relaxed that she fell asleep. When she woke up, she found Tumnus crying. Shocked, she asked him why. Tumnus confessed, "I've made a terrible mistake. I was supposed to kidnap you." He explained that Narnia was cursed by a white witch who had cast a spell over the land for the past 6 years. Anyone who entered Narnia was to be handed over to her. Lucy, now teary-eyed, asked, "But you're my friend. You wouldn't do that, would you?" Tumnus was incredibly kind. He was moved by Lucy's innocent face and decided to help her return to the real world. Lucy quickly left through the wardrobe and returned to her world. She was astonished to find her siblings still playing. Confused, she asked, "I've been gone so long. Didn't any of you even worry about me?" Her brother replied casually, "Maybe you just didn't feel like playing. You were hiding for just a second, and here you are, back already." Lucy tried to explain to them about the magical world inside the wardrobe, but no one believed her. They even checked the wardrobe themselves, only to find clothes and nothing else. That night, while everyone else was asleep, Lucy returned to the wardrobe to check again. This time, her brother Edmund secretly followed her. As Edmund followed Lucy, he too entered the magical forest of Narnia. While searching for Lucy, Edmund ventured deep into the snowy woods. Suddenly, a grand carriage appeared before him, and out stepped the White Witch, dressed in pure white. The witch spoke kindly to Edmund, coaxing him into her carriage. She cleverly asked him where he was from, who his parents were, and other details. Using her magic, she created some enchanted food for him. While he ate, she said, "I've been searching for a boy like you, someone who could rule Narnia." Through her cunning words, the witch completely entrapped Edmund. She promised, "I will make you the king of Narnia, but of course a king needs servants, so you must bring your siblings here too." Edmund, spellbound, promised, "I'll definitely bring them all." After the witch left, Lucy arrived and found Edmund. Overjoyed, she hugged him tightly and exclaimed, "See? I wasn't lying. You're here too." The two siblings returned to their world through the wardrobe. Lucy eagerly told Peter and Susan about Narnia again. When she mentioned Edmund, hoping he would back her up, Edmund denied everything, calling it a lie. The next morning, the four siblings were playing cricket outside. During the game, their ball accidentally broke a window. Terrified of the housekeeper's wrath, They ran to hide in the room with the wardrobe. In their haste, all 4 siblings squeezed into the wardrobe. As they stumbled further inside, they suddenly found themselves in Narnia's snowy forest. Peter and Susan were in disbelief, realizing Lucy had been telling the truth all along. Furious, they called Edmund a liar. Susan, visibly scared, insisted they should return home. But Lucy was determined. She wanted everyone to meet Tumnus. Narnia was freezing cold, with heavy snow everywhere. Peter took some overcoats from the wardrobe to keep them warm. Together, they ventured to Tumnus's home. When they reached Tumnus's cave, they found it had been destroyed. Tumnus was gone. Peter and Susan found a letter on the wall. It read, "Anyone who betrays the White Witch will be punished." Lucy tried to convince everyone, "We have to help Tumnus. It's my fault he's in trouble." As they left the cave, they encountered a talking beaver. The children were astonished to see an animal that could speak. The beaver told them, "Before Tumnus was captured, he came to see me." The beaver asked the siblings to follow him. This sparked an argument among them. "It's just an animal," they said. "Should we really trust it and go with it?" But Lucy, determined to help Tumnus at any cost, convinced them. Reluctantly, they followed the beaver to its home. At the house, they met the beaver's wife. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver shared a startling revelation. Aslan, the great Lion King, was preparing his army to fight the White Witch. The siblings, however, knew nothing about Aslan. The Beavers explained that all of this had been foretold in an ancient prophecy. The prophecy stated that the White Witch had used dark magic to enslave all of Narnia. Only when 4 human children from the world of men arrived and defeated her would the land be freed from her curse. When that day came, the siblings would be crowned as the rightful kings and queens of Narnia. The children were stunned. To them, this sounded like nothing more than a fairy tale. But soon they noticed something alarming. Edmund was missing. As they searched for him, they saw Edmund climbing down a hill, heading straight for the White Witch's castle. Furious, Peter declared, "I'm going to bring him back." But Mr. Beaver stopped him, saying, "This is exactly what the White Witch wanted. She set a trap to bring all 4 of you to Narnia. If she captures you, she will kill you and destroy the prophecy." Peter, filled with emotion, replied, "I don't care about any prophecy. I just want my brother back." Mr. Beaver sighed and said, "Only Aslan can save him now." Meanwhile, Edmund reached the castle. There, he saw eerie statues of creatures, half human, half animal, turned to stone. Suddenly, the White Witch appeared. Furious, she yelled, "Why are you here alone? Where are your siblings?" Terrified, Edmund stammered, "They were coming, but they stopped at a beaver's house." Hearing this, the witch's face turned cold with anger. She ordered her wolves to find the others and bring them to her. Then, she imprisoned Edmund in a dark cell. In the neighboring cell, Edmund saw a familiar figure. It was Tumnus. The fawn was in terrible shape, weak and injured. Tumnus looked at him and asked softly, "Are you Lucy's brother? Is she safe? Is she okay?" But Edmund, filled with guilt and uncertainty, could not answer. Just then, the White Witch stormed in. She glared at Edmund and hissed, "Tell me the truth. Where are your siblings?" Mr. Tumnus didn't want Edmund to reveal anything, so he tried to distract him by starting a conversation. But the White Witch, realizing this, removed Tumnus from the room. Meanwhile, the other siblings, along with Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, traveled far and finally reached a frozen river. Mr. Beaver explained, "This river has been frozen solid for the past 6 years. On the other side lies Aslan's camp." Suddenly, they heard a noise that startled them. Quickly, they hid on a nearby slope, fearing that the White Witch had found them. After a long wait, Mr. Beaver went to check and discovered it wasn't the witch. Instead, it was Santa Claus. For the first time in their lives, the children saw the real Santa Claus, leaving them astonished. Santa gifted each of them something special. Lucy received a magical bottle of healing liquid and a small dagger. Santa explained, "Just 1 drop from this bottle can save a life." Susan was given a bow and arrows, with Santa assuring her, "Your aim will never miss." He also gifted her a magical horn, saying, "Blow this, and help will come to you, no matter where you are." Peter received a powerful sword and shield. Grateful and inspired by the gifts, they moved forward toward the river. To reach Aslan, they needed to cross the river. But the weather suddenly began to change. The frozen river started to thaw. At the same time, the wolves pursuing them caught up. One wolf managed to capture Mr. Beaver. Seeing this, Peter drew his sword. The wolf sneered and said, "That sword of yours is useless. Throw it away and we won't harm you." From a distance, Mr. Beaver shouted, "Don't trust a word he says." Just then, the ice from the frozen waterfall nearby began to crack. Unsure of what to do, Peter drove his sword into the ice. The force of the water swept Peter, Susan, and Lucy to the riverbank. As Susan looked around, she realized Lucy wasn't with them. Thinking she might have been swept away by the current, Susan and Peter panicked. But moments later, Lucy emerged from the water, safe and sound. As they regrouped and moved on, the White Witch arrived at the riverbank. Seeing the ice melted, she hesitated, a flicker of fear crossing her face. With her were the fox and Edmund, still her captive. Meanwhile, the three siblings finally reached Aslan's camp. There, they saw strange creatures, half human, half animal, gathered together. These were the true defenders of Narnia. Seeing the siblings, the creatures gathered around, curious and amazed. Peter stepped forward, unsheathing his sword, and said, "I've come to meet Aslan." Aslan emerged, majestic and powerful. His golden mane glistened, and his commanding presence filled the space. Every creature present bowed in reverence. The great lion welcomed the siblings warmly, as if he had known them forever. He asked, "Where is your other brother?" The siblings explained everything, how the White Witch had tricked Edmund and taken him captive. They pleaded for Aslan's help to save their brother. Aslan listened intently and reminded them of the prophecy. What is destined will come to pass. Time will reveal all truths. What is to happen has already been written. Meanwhile, the White Witch was preparing her army to battle Aslan. She kept Edmund locked tightly in her dungeon, plotting her next move. Susan and Lucy had waded into a river, but soon the wolves arrived, ready to attack them. Terrified, Susan blew the magical horn she had received. Hearing the horn, Peter realized that Susan and Lucy must be in grave danger. Without delay, Aslan, along with some of his soldiers, reached the river. One wolf was killed instantly by Aslan's powerful strike, while another fled. Aslan's soldiers pursued it, eventually tracking it to the White Witch's location. Aslan had sent his soldiers to negotiate a truce with the White Witch, leading to Edmund's release. Finally, Edmund was reunited with his siblings. The next day, everyone was preparing for battle in their own way, when Mr. Beaver arrived with urgent news. The White Witch wanted to meet Aslan. The meeting took place, and after some discussion, Aslan returned with grim news. He announced, "Edmund is not entirely safe. He has been released on a condition. If the White Witch's terms are violated, she will have the right to kill him." That night, Lucy couldn't sleep. From inside the tent, she saw Aslan walking into the forest. She woke Susan, and together they followed him quietly. Aslan noticed their presence but allowed them to follow for a while. Eventually, he turned and asked them to leave. Though reluctant, they respected his wishes and stayed back, watching from a distance. To their horror, they saw Aslan offering himself to the White Witch in exchange for Edmund's life. The witch accepted his sacrifice and killed him with a dagger. After the witch and her soldiers left, Susan and Lucy rushed to Aslan's lifeless body. Grieving, Lucy tried to use her magical healing potion to save him, but Susan stopped her, saying, "It won't work. He's already gone." In despair, Susan used enchanted forest leaves to send a message back to Aslan's camp. The leaves reached Peter, informing him of Aslan's death. The next day was the day of the great battle. With Aslan gone, Peter had to take command and lead the army against the White Witch's forces. Meanwhile, Susan and Lucy stayed by Aslan's body, mourning through the night. As dawn broke, they began to leave, but suddenly the ground shook. They turned to see that Aslan's body had vanished. Moments later, Aslan himself appeared, walking toward them, alive and majestic. The sisters were stunned. "How is this possible?" they asked. Aslan explained, "The stone table bears an ancient inscription. If an innocent being is killed upon it, the table will break, and death itself will reverse its path. I live again because of this law." He then asked the sisters to climb onto his back, and together they sped toward the battlefield. At the battlefield, the war was intense. Aslan's forces were struggling against the witch's army, who had the advantage of her dark magic. With her enchanted staff, the White Witch could turn anything into stone. Edmund, showing immense bravery, confronted the witch directly. In a desperate move, he destroyed her magical staff. Enraged, the witch stabbed Edmund with the broken staff. Peter then stepped forward to face the witch in combat, skillfully wielding his sword. Meanwhile, Aslan arrived at the witch's castle with Susan and Lucy. There, he restored life to all the stone statues, reviving the soldiers who had been turned to stone. Together, they joined the battlefield. The White Witch was shocked to see Aslan alive. "Impossible! I killed you with my own hands!" she exclaimed. Without a word, Aslan leapt toward her, his massive body and razor-sharp claws striking with unstoppable force. In a single blow, he killed the White Witch. The battle ended instantly. Lucy used her magical potion to heal Edmund, bringing him back to life. The final scene showed a grand palace where the four siblings were crowned as the kings and queens of Narnia. All the creatures of Narnia gathered to celebrate. Aslan left quietly after the coronation. Lucy, saddened by his departure, was comforted by Mr. Tumnus, who assured her, "When the time is right, Aslan will return." The story then shifted to 15 years later. The four siblings had grown into adults and were now wise rulers of Narnia. While riding through the forest, they stumbled upon a familiar place. Seeing a lamppost, memories came rushing back. They realized they were near the wardrobe. They found the wardrobe and stepped through it, instantly becoming children again. Time in the real world hadn't moved at all. Professor Diggory greeted them, asking, "Where have you been?" The siblings smiled and replied, "You wouldn't believe us if we told you." And so, the story ends here. If you'd like to hear the next chapters of this tale, let us know in the comments.